All right, thank you everyone for calling in for today's meeting. John, you want to get us started?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Looks like we're ready to go. Lots of you joining us here today. Thanks for joining us. And just wanted to recognize a few people on the call. Bob Bear, thanks for joining us. Bob was our general manager a number of years ago. And looks like we also have a couple of our current board members on the call, Shane Romsos and Dave Peterson. That's all I can see. If I'm missing any of the board members out there, I apologize. Okay. And I think if you want to send comments, there is a chat function, and there will be time at the end of this meeting, at least 15 minutes for questions and comments. So I think I'll just get going on this presentation. I'm John Teal. I'm the general manager of the South Tahoe Public Utility District, and I wanted to welcome you to our very first Stakeholders Advisory Group and Public Workshop for the Recycled Water Strategic Plan. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day and joining us on this new journey, which I think will be a very interesting, exciting, and innovative strategic planning process. We're looking for the very best ways to manage and use our recycled water for the next 50 plus years. So let's take a look at what we have coming your way today in this workshop. First, I'll introduce you to the Recycled Water Strategic Plan and our project team, and then provide a brief history, a very brief history of the district and our existing system and how we got into the recycled water business. Then with others on the project team, we'll go through the various elements of the Recycled Water Strategic Plan in a little more detail. We'll talk about the public engagement opportunities. And then we should have, as I said, about, I think at least 15 minutes at the end of this hour for a question and answer period. Okay, next slide. So an introduction to the plan and the project team. So we are here today to talk about a new strategic plan for how we manage and use our recycled water. We will explain why the district is embarking on this process at this time. We'll help you understand the overall process and timeline, and you can learn how you can stay informed and be involved and have a voice in this plan. The plan is being completed by the South Tahoe SDPUD with assistance from our consulting team from Carollo Engineers. And today we begin engaging with you, our stakeholders, advisory group, and the public. Next slide, please. So our project team from the district, that includes me, the general manager, and our principal engineer, Steve Caswell. He is the project manager for this strategic plan. And also from the district, Shelley Thompson. She is the district's public affairs and conservation manager. As I mentioned, we're being assisted by Carollo Engineers, who are really international leaders in water engineering. And Carollo, they put together a local regional group of engineering and subject area experts to assist the district in developing this strategic plan. The Carollo team is being led by Alyssa Garvey, and we will hear from her and others a little later in this presentation today. So on the next slide, a very brief history in one single slide at this time. So the district was established in 1950 by local leaders in South Lake Tahoe as they saw, more and more people settling into the South Shore. They recognized significant sewer system problems, actually observing some sewage flows right into beautiful Lake Tahoe. And so, of course, they recognized quickly that had to stop, something needed to be done. So the district was formed in 1950. Soon thereafter, a small treatment facility was built, actually at our current location, which is between Blackbard and El Tahoe. We're right near Trout Creek. And actually, right now, we're next to the community college that was built a number of years later. So, wastewater was treated on this site and on property behind us, applied to the nearby land where it infiltrated into the ground. But as more and more people came to the South Shore, more treatment capacity was added in the 1950s and early 1960s. And then, with more stringent regulations on the horizon, the district began building the most advanced treatment system in the country, perhaps the world at the time, a treatment system called tertiary treatment, right here in Little South Lake Tahoe. So by the time the Porter Cologne Act came along and required export out of the basin by 1972, the district had already begun exporting highly treated wastewater out of the basin and into Alpine County for reuse in 1960. Actually, in 1969 is when export began. And just as I want to talk a little bit more about the district, we are a public utility. There's no stockholders, there's no profit. We are owned by the public, and if you are a sewer customer, a ratepayer in South Lake Tahoe, you are an owner of our system. You have a voice in what we do and how we do it. And in part, that's why we are all here with you today. So a little more about the district. We provide all of the wastewater collection, treatment, and recycled water services on the South Shore side of California. The district also provides water service to about 80% of customers on the South Shore. This is drinking water and water for fire flow. But today we are focusing on wastewater and the beneficial use of our recycled water coming out of the treatment plant process. And you can really be proud of our history of innovation and excellence here at the district and with our treatment and recycled water operations. As I mentioned, we were the first tertiary treatment plant in the US. And we've been twice named the US EPA #1 plant of the year in 1994 and again in 2001. 100% of our treated effluent coming out of the treatment plant is reused beneficially in Alpine County, and more on that to come later. But also 100% of our plant biosolids is recycled through composting and reuse as fertilizer. And we also generate electricity off of our export system, the system that goes from our treatment plant and takes our treated water all the way to Alpine County. More on that later. But as this water drops over Luther Pass and down past Woodfords into Alpine County to our Diamond Valley Ranch facility, there we generate 380 megawatt hours of electricity. And this saves over 100 tons of CO2, greenhouse gas, per year. And this is also equivalent to about how much electricity 50 homes would use. So that's a very brief history of the district, an introduction to our recycled water system. And now Steve Caswell will give you more detail on the recycled water strategic plan. Steve?
All right, thank you, John. So why is the district doing this now? Well, what we're kind of faced with right now is we have an aging recycled water export system. It's been in service, as John noted, since the late 60s. We have the expiration of various agreements associated with our recycled water. And there's been new technologies that have advanced since we've started exporting water, and as well as new legislation and regulations surrounding recycled water and water reuse within California. And not to mention that with those, there's been a greater acceptance of water reuse in California. And finally, we have an increased focus on energy efficiency and the reduction in greenhouse gases. So with all of that put together, we kind of find ourselves at an inflection point, which is a time for us to reconsider how we are managing and using our recycled water. And so we'll talk a little bit more about all those elements a little bit later. But really what this is it's the district taking a proactive approach for the future of our community. And so we're going to look at options that will determine the most cost-effective, innovative, and environmentally conscious way to manage the recycled water in the future. So with that, I will jump into an overview of our existing system, our existing recycled water system. So our recycled water system basically consists of three major components. There's the wastewater treatment plant here in town. There's an export pipeline that extends from the treatment plant all the way over Luther Pass and into Alpine County, where our reuse facilities are located. So all the wastewater in the district service area is collected and sent to the wastewater treatment plant adjacent to our offices here in town. As John mentioned, the first treatment plant of any kind was located on this exact site, and it was built in 1956, and it had a capacity of 50,000 gallons per day. Through various modifications and expansions, we now have the wastewater treatment plant that we have now, and that it has a capacity of 7.7 million gallons per day, and we typically see flows between 3 to 4 MGD, but during rain on snow events and in wet weather, we've seen flows as high as 18 MGDs. So it has to be very flexible, has to accommodate a large fluctuation in flows. And I'm sorry, I'm going to make sure everyone's muted. There we go. And the other thing about our treatment plant is that it is an advanced secondary treatment process, and I'll explain a little bit more on the next slide about why that is important for water reuse. And so then once the treatment of the wastewater is complete, recycled water is pumped from our wastewater treatment plant approximately 10 miles to our Luther Pass pump station, which is at the base of Luther Pass, hence the name. It's at the end of Grass Lake Road out in the Christmas Valley area. And from there, we then pump the recycled water over Luther Pass. So we lift it approximately 1,300 feet to the top of Luther Pass. And then from the top of Luther Pass, it then flows by gravity down to our facilities out in Alpine County. And as John mentioned, while the water is flowing down from Luther Pass to Alpine County, we have a hydroelectric facility installed on that pipeline that helps us recover some of the energy. And that went online in 2018 and is something that we continue to operate today. So in total, the recycled water travels about 26 miles from the treatment plant to the district's facilities in Alpine County. All right, so now talking a little bit more about reuse options in California. Basically, as I said, our system is an advanced secondary treatment system. And so the approved uses for an advanced secondary treatment system are the ones that are highlighted in the box at the lower part of this table. And so what this shows is that there are other opportunities out there for other uses that we currently can't do. So we are somewhat constrained by our existing wastewater treatment plant, but the recycled water strategic plan will look at all options, including, if we needed to modify the treatment processes to go to a higher level of treatment and potentially those higher beneficial uses of recycled water. All right, so our recycled water system facilities out in Alpine County, they consist of the hydropower generation facility that we've talked about. We have some irrigation fields where the district grows alfalfa that's irrigated by recycled water. We have some lands that are leased for cattle grazing, and we have Harvey Place Reservoir where we store all of our recycled water. And then we have a series of ditches that we use to distribute the recycled water to the ranchers who ultimately use it for their irrigation. So as the water comes down from Luther Pass, on the left-hand side of this slide, in the green it basically represents the pipeline from there. So as it comes down from Luther Pass, it then can go one of two ways. It can follow the orange pathway, which goes to the hydropower generation facility. If that is offline, it can bypass that and just follow the green line all the way over to Harvey Place Reservoir. From mid-October, Harvey Place Reservoir stores recycled water. So it fills up through the winter, and then starting in the mid to late spring, it kind of depends on the year and on the winter that has been had and the irrigation needs, but usually in mid to late spring, we start releases from the reservoir and to the through Diamond Ditch to the ranchers. And we also will start irrigating the alfalfa fields at that time as well. The district typically has 3 cuttings of alfalfa a year, and we sell the crop on the open market. And so the revenue that generates does go to offset some of our operational costs. In addition to the recycled water facilities, we do the cattle grazing. We lease that land to a rancher for cattle grazing, so that is also a revenue generating enterprise for the district. And then finally, not shown on the slide, but we do manage a series of freshwater ditches and diversions to provide irrigation waters to various locations in Diamond Valley. And so with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Elisa Garvey with Carollo to talk more about the actual recycled water strategic plan and what that will encompass.
Okay, thanks, Steve. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I want to start just stepping back a minute here. A bit of an explanation is what is a strategic plan and what are those associated expected outcomes of a strategic plan. In general, we may all be a little bit more used to a master planning process, which is shown on the right-hand side of this graphic, where we have maybe a shorter, relatively shorter planning horizon. We have some specific or objectives or upcoming challenges that we want to address over that 10 to 20-year planning horizon. The plan would involve the identification of alternatives and evaluation of alternatives, followed by the selection of a preferred alternative or a project. And then typically what would be associated with that project would be the development of a project CIP. So in contrast, a strategic plan is a planning document that is a little bit higher level and has more general outcomes. So in this case, the Recycled Water Strategic Plan will provide the overall direction for the district's recycled water system, and it'll include consideration of factors that may trigger change in the current practice and the potential alternatives or suite of alternatives that could be implemented in response to that change. Okay, next slide, please. So oh, I'm not getting it. It hasn't yet advanced on my end, Steve, but
Elisa, can you clarify what CIP stands for?
Capital Improvement Program. So the Recycled Water Strategic Plan will be developed through a stepwise process where we start with compiling data and information on the existing plant and defining the overall goal of the strategic plan, which you've heard of earlier in this presentation. We then identify factors that influence how recycled water is currently treated and used, and how those factors that could influence that in the future. We then proceed to conducting an evaluation of current and future regulatory constraints and opportunities. We then combine all that information, the overall plan goal, the existing system performance, those factors that may influence change, and the regulatory frameworks. And collectively, this information really sets the stage for identifying potential alternatives. And when we do this identification of alternatives, sort of consistent with the concept of a strategy, we will start with a wide range of alternatives. Steve alluded to this earlier, like a a broad range of alternatives will be developed initially. We'll then reduce this large number of alternatives to maybe a handful or so by applying screening criteria. And then after that, we'll have a shortlisted group of alternatives from that screening process that will be further developed. Then those will be evaluated based on criteria, ranked, and then incorporated into the preferred strategy. So along the way in the development of the strategic plan, we'll produce a series of memos, and all of that information feeds into the strategic plan. We will also, as shown in this slide, incorporate formal points of engagement with the stakeholder advisory group and the public, and you'll hear a little bit more about that engagement process and those engagement opportunities a bit later in this presentation. So next slide, please. So this graphic here is just a simple timeline of the project. We are expecting an approximate 3-year process, and this timeline shows some of the key elements of the plan development that I just mentioned on the previous slide. So to date, what we've done is we've held a project team kickoff meeting and compiled a variety of background information and data. So we're currently here in February 2022. We're at that first yellow diamond where we are having our first stakeholder advisory and public workshop. And then as you can see, as we move into the future, these key elements of the plan process where we have alternatives identification, identification and the screening process, further alternatives development, and then the alternatives evaluation, all feeding into the development of the Recycle Water Strategic Plan. Okay, next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're in the early stages of the Recycle Water Strategic Plan development, as you've seen on these last 2 slides. But we'd like to take this opportunity to share with you some of our initial work. So in this early stage, we've started thinking about these factors that would influence change in the way the district currently treats and recycles water. And since the strategy sets the overall direction for the system into the future, it's important to capture those influencing factors that are present now and influencing factors that may be present in the future. So this graphic shows 6 categories of factors that will be considered in the development of the strategic plan, and those categories include regulations, or regulatory, legal, economics, the community, sustainability, and technology. I'm going to talk about each of these in a bit more detail. Next slide, please. So as was mentioned earlier, the district has a long history of regulatory compliance. A potential influencing factor are changing regulations. Examples of that could be more stringent regulations on the land application of recycled water in Alpine County. Another example could be the continued evolution of regulatory frameworks for different types of water reuse. We've seen an evolution over the past several decades of different types of approved recycled water uses in California, and we expect that to continue to evolve into the future. Next slide, please. As Steve mentioned, the district has agreements with ranchers for the use of recycled water. Influencing factors that could, in the legal category, may include the negotiation of contracts in the future that maybe the unfavorable contract conditions may be realized in the future. That would be an influencing factor to do something different. Or looking at revising or looking at and revisiting the Port of Cologne Act in light of reuse regulations and technologies that have evolved over the decades. Next slide, please. The next influencing factor is economics. As you've heard, the district is already recovering energy through the hydropower system. There could be future opportunities to optimize energy recovery. This goes hand in hand with sustainability that I'll talk about in a minute here. Another economic factor would be the opportunity for the district to receive revenue for the recycled water, this valuable resource that the district is producing. Next slide. The next influencing factor is the community. There could be opportunity for change associated with that greater and greater acceptance of the use of recycled water. Steve mentioned this earlier, and the acceptance of recycled water has evolved over the past decades. through various types of regulatory frameworks and implementation throughout the state. In addition, the community has brought in through this process, will probably continue to suggest ideas for improving the district system. The next factor is sustainability. This is another factor that may affect change in how the district treats and uses recycled water. You know, the effects of climate change that are important in the broader region include concerns with more severe and more frequent drought, as well as more intense and frequent wildfire. So those are influencing factors that could motivate an alternative changes to the system and changes to how recycled water is used. There are also potential opportunities to consider enhancement of the beneficial use of recycled water. For recycled water is valued for many reasons, and there could be opportunities to enhance those beyond those existing beneficial uses. And finally, technological factors. You've heard that the district has been a technology leader and that in its current practice of producing advanced secondary wastewater for reuse. There's opportunity to consider implementation of advanced treatment processes aimed at wastewater purification, at the highest level. This has close ties back to producing recycled water with a greater number of approved uses within the regulatory frameworks that are available in California. And finally, also considering technological advancements in energy recovery that could further enhance that process. So as you've seen in the project schedule, a future task will be the identification of alternatives. And what I just went through on these couple slides where I've introduced the factors that could influence how recycled water is treated and used, those factors really form the basis for developing that wide range of alternatives that could be implemented to respond to these existing and future constraints and opportunities. So we're not going to get into the details on the alternatives identification today because that's future work that will be done. We wanted to provide a little bit of information on the range of alternatives that may be considered. And these alternatives you can sort of segment into three categories or three buckets. And those categories are the first one of maintaining the existing system. In this case, the system is the same and there are investments as needed to maintain the existing function and the existing performance of the system. The next group is the existing system with optimization. In this case, the basic functionality of the system is maintained, but elements of the system may be optimized. So examples of that would be enhancing energy recovery or an alternative end uses of recycled water that may provide revenue as examples. And the third group is a new system where the functionality is different. An example of that, a new system would be a potential in-basin use of recycled water. This graphic shows an in-basin injection of recycled water. So with that overview of the recycled water strategic plan development and a little bit of information on some of our early project activities, I'm going to turn it back over to Shelley to talk about ongoing engagement in this process in plan development.
All right, and Shelley has lost her voice, so I'm going to do the public engagement slides. So, for public participation, as John mentioned in his introduction, we are a public utility. So this system is the community system. So it's important to us that the future of our recycled water system reflects the wants, needs, and desires of our community. We will do our best to keep you up to date on the development of the Recycled Water Strategic Plan, and we do want to hear from you throughout this process. The hub for project information is our website. It's stpud.us/recycled-water-strategic-plan. This will be frequently updated with project info as it's developed and future meeting dates. If you would like to be added to our email alerts regarding this project, please send us an email at recycledwater@stpud.us. You can also give us a call at 530-544-6474 with questions or ideas. My extension is on there as well. It's extension 6202. All future meetings will also be posted on our social media accounts, so you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, so with that, we will start to open it up for Q&A. So you've heard a lot from us, and now it's your opportunity to ask us questions or provide us with some feedback. You can ask a question in one of two ways. If you logged in from your computer, oops, let me go on there. There we go. If you logged in from your computer, you can go into the chat box in the GoToMeeting. If you're on the phone, you can either toggle the unmute button on your phone or press *6 to unmute if that does not work. So at this point, I'll open the floor to questions. Okay, well, I don't see, oh, one just came. Yes, Larry Alba.
I would like to know if they are considering to upgrade the existing system that they have, because I don't quite understand about this other way of recycling water.
So, yes, the treatment plant as it currently stands, does treat to a level that allows recycled water uses, but there are higher levels of treatment that we could modify the system to do that would allow different uses. And so that is one of the options that we will be evaluating and seeing what it would take for us to go down that path. Looks like we have a couple more questions in the chat at this point. Dave Peterson, one of our board members, asked if the plan is subject to CEQA, and it is not. A master plan would be, but a strategic plan is not. And then Shane Navarro from TRPA asked what's entailed by revisiting the Porter-Cologne Act. That's what we're going to find out. It's potentially, oh, I'm sorry. Is someone trying to talk? Okay. By revisiting the Porter-Cologne Act, it's honestly one of those things that it's an idea out there, but what it would actually entail, we need to dive into that and figure out and see if that's even a possibility. And so that's part of the purpose of the strategic plan to do that.
And we've engaged regulatory experts, legal and regulatory experts on the team, to the subject matter experts to do that very thing that Steve is talking about.
Yeah, so currently the Porter-Cologne Act essentially requires export of treated water outside of the basin, regardless of the quality. So I think one of our thoughts is to, if we had, with all the new technologies, if we could treat to an extremely high level with today's technology, is there an opening to perhaps reuse that recycled water in the basin? So that's one of the things we're looking at.
All right, Tiffany had asked, can you speak more to the involvement of Alpine County in the SAG, which is the Stakeholder Advisory Group? We are actually going to do separate outreach to Alpine County, and we are Alpine County Watershed Group is a member of the SAG, but to actually talk to Alpine County, we will be doing that on a separate track. And then Julie asked if I can give a brief summary of what entities are participating in the SAG group. And I can. Let me pull up my list. So we have formed the Stakeholder Advisory Group, and in that group we have representatives from Lahontan Regional Board, from TRPA, the City of South Lake Tahoe, El Dorado County, both Lukens Brothers and Tahoe Keys Water Suppliers, the Tahoe Water Suppliers Association, Incline Village, IVGIT is also a part of the Stakeholder Advisory Group, as they are very similar to us with a lot of the similar, they export. The Alpine Watershed Group is also involved, as I mentioned previously. League to Save Lake Tahoe, the Sierra Nevada Alliance, the Washoe Tribe, Tahoe Environmental Research Center, U.S. Forest Service, and Tahoe Resource Conservation District. So those are the current members of our SAG. There are a few others that we have yet to get a response from that we hope to include as well, but haven't heard back from them yet. And then Evan, I think I had answered your question about specifically in the SAG, who are you working with from Alpine County in this process? With we are Alpine County Watershed Group, and we'll be doing outreach to the county separately. And then Evan asked a follow-up of why separate. And John, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, our ratepayers are in South Lake Tahoe and have, I think, a different set of maybe ideas and input than Alpine County would have. And we certainly want to give Alpine County all the opportunities to speak to all the different issues and concerns and ideas that they may have. So at this time, we just thought it'd be better to have kind of separate outreach and see where that gets us. And of course, on the next go round, maybe we'll just do a single meeting. Not sure yet.
Evan, thank you for the suggestion for Alpine. Is it Alpine Trails Group, I'm assuming?
Steve, it looks like Larry has his hand raised.
Okay.
May I speak?
All right. Yes.
Oh, I noticed that we're not talking about what might happen to this water, and I would like to know right now: are they considering to put toilet water through our recycled toilet water through the pipeline to come to my house? I don't want to drink it under no conditions, none, ever. Are they considering it? Because you guys are really quiet about the way you're talking. You never really said what are the alternatives besides shipping it over the mountain. Very quiet about that. And I want to know, are they considering to ship it to my house in South Lake Tahoe?
At this time, I don't believe that is really a feasible option because we have plentiful water supply. But indirect potable reuse is an option that we will be investigating, whether it's feasible or not. Again, this is.
You never mentioned one thing. I never heard one thing that they might do with it. One thing. What?
That's because we haven't developed the options yet, and so we're still we're at the very beginning of this process, and we wanted to just introduce the concepts and the ideas to the community at this point, and we will have further public meetings to go through those options and to present those options to the community and take feedback on them.
Yeah, and I think real quickly, I mean, just running through some options at the top of our head, and we already have more than a dozen, perhaps more than 20 different ideas right now, and many of those have kind of sub alternatives. But you know, we could just continue our existing system with or without improvements. We could treat at a higher level, which would give us, you know, additional options for reuse, either in Alpine County and or in the Tahoe Basin. One of the in-basin potential reuses, should that pan out from a regulatory and economic and community and all the other aspects, would be perhaps reinjection deep into the groundwater system. So those just are some 3 basic categories of potential projects.
I don't like that one, injecting it into the groundwater system. I don't like that at all.
I hear you.
Okay, and then the next question, it looks like Tiffany, what is the districts and Carollo's experience in working with ONRWs, which I'm not familiar with that acronym.
Hi, Steve, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Outstanding National Resource Water. So I would just say that there are pretty high restrictions on outstanding national resource waters that we would probably need to look into, especially if we're talking about anything in the Tahoe Basin. So I just wanted to see if Carollo had experience working with any other outstanding national ONRWs, especially for any strategic plans or especially for recycled water strategic plans.
So there are none that come to mind off the top of my head, but I could look into that and get back to you on that. But certainly all of the regulatory, any kind of regulatory framework around any element that would be involved in a recycled water alternative would be explored thoroughly and considered in this process. So, but I can look into that and get back to you if I have a specific example.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Sure.
And looks like Evan, also, it looks like you are unmuted. So
yeah, I was able to do that on my own, Stephen. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just like to make a comment specifically on what Larry said about not putting this water back into the ground. This water already goes back into the ground. And anyone who doesn't realize that is naive on how this process works. This water goes into the groundwater in Alpine County. I think it's perfectly safe. It'd be nice to see it treated to tertiary level before it went into the open environment. But it's not as if the water table stops and ends on one side of the Luther Pass or the other. There's no imaginary barrier. The groundwater table does not care. So this water in Harvey, the bottom of Harvey Reservoir is not lined with plastic. So I just want to point that out from we're the partners on this side of the pass, and I live just a few miles from Harvey Place Reservoir. This is already in our groundwater and has been since 1968 or whatever. And just pointing that out. And that's really all I had to say.
Thank you, Evan. All right, any other questions? There's nothing else in the chat at this time or comments.
I would maybe just like a clarification on that last group of alternatives. The groundwater injection alternative as an idea was given as an example. So that's all that was at this time, and there may be other sort of different functionalities of the system that would be considered, and those would be different alternatives. So that was provided as an example. I just want to be clear on that.
Could be landscape irrigation, could be irrigation for fire protection areas.
Exactly.
Well, just one clarifying question on that point, though. As I understand it, as presently constituted, the Port of Cologne Act would prevent any of that usage, though, inside of the basin. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, as currently. So
So it's a
yeah,
pretty big.
to do anything like that, we would have to do the revisiting Port of Cologne, the Port of Cologne Act that Shay had asked about and what that entails. And it entails quite a bit, just from thinking about it out loud. But we want to know what it would take to do that, and if that's even a viable option for us.
Right. It seems like that's step one before putting a lot of effort into these kind of ideas about usage within the basin. It may be better just to sort of focus on option 1 and 2, but that's just my feedback.
Yeah, and that's why the first step in the whole process was looking at the regulatory and legal context of recycled water in California and in the Tahoe Basin, and helping to define those parameters of what is even potentially possible.
Understood. That makes sense.
Steve, this is Shane. I was curious, can you talk a little bit, or at least clarify kind of the boundaries of the assessment in terms of recycled water reuse, and that, there's 2,200 acres or so of Diamond Valley Ranch. Is there an opportunity to bring in concepts like solar facility or other renewable energy type generation facilities, maybe biomass facility? One of the ideas that I've been batting around quite a bit is, maybe utilizing some of the land for constructed wetlands as being a means to generate wildlife habitat, also potentially, have it maybe participate in maybe a conservation easement of some sort that maybe generate revenue that way as well. Can you kind of talk around kind of the boundaries, like where are the limits to the strategic analysis?
Sure. Currently, it is more of a strategic plan. We will look at what it would take to do certain things. We're not looking at we're not necessarily looking at things that don't deal with recycled water. So if there is a nexus between recycled water and biomass and, say, constructed wetlands, like if we were using the water in the constructed wetlands, that could maybe be part of it. But we are more looking just at the uses of recycled water and what those options for that recycled water are. We're not going to go too far down the road of the biomass or the constructed wetlands unless those turned out to look like they were going to be a really feasible option for the district.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Coral Taylor with Corollo Engineers. And I just wanted to note that if anyone called in today, we don't have your email address unless you've already signed up. So if you would like to be notified of our future meetings, you can send an email. Would you mind re-sharing that screen, Steve?
Sure.
It's at recycledwater@stpud.us. And that way we'll make sure that we have everyone engaged in this process.
Yes, I will put that in the chat. All right. Okay, so if there are no more comments or questions, then I just want to thank everyone for their attention and participation in today's meeting. I appreciate everyone's comments, and we do want to hear everyone's voices. So please stay engaged with this process as we work through it. Again, we have the project webpage address listed here. It is, you can find it under news and notices under our main district webpage. All of the latest information will be on the project webpage, and including this meeting was recorded, so that will also, all the meetings will be recorded and be uploaded to the webpage for people to look at who couldn't attend. Or if you want to remember something that we said, it'll be on there. And you know, this is a really exciting project for the district. It's a reimagining. Potentially, it could be a reimagining of what we are doing, and we want to make sure that it reflects the community. And we really look forward to hearing from all of you during the development of this plan. So with that, again, thanks everyone for attending, and stay tuned for more information.